The tower breathes at midnight, a cathedral of glass inhaling fog and exhaling secrets, and in the hush a small sound breaks like a match struck in a cave. A word shaped by a mouth that barely knows words, a summons that does not belong to this place of white badges and silent elevators. The floors gleam like lakes, the city hums far below, and a heartbeat starts keeping time with the soft whir of climate vents, pulling the night toward a center that should not exist. The crib light glows the color of warm honey. Tiny fingers reach, gravity tilts, and everything learned about staying invisible wobbles on its axis. The call repeats, softer now, more certain, and it lands with the weight of a lifetime misfiled, of paperwork that once traded hope for rent. A lullaby rises uninvited, an old melody that fits the air like a key in a lock. And the world narrows to breath and rhythm and the unbearable sense that a choice made years ago has finally found its echo. Footsteps break the seal of the corridor and the soft order of machines snaps alert. Instinct yanks the body behind a column, but a cry insists on steadiness, on a song without fear. The door sighs, souls tap in a rhythm that speaks of ownership, of systems built to keep questions small. A shadow crosses the crib, and the air cools another degree. The melody shivers, changes key to something older, and the storm outside moves inside, rattling the quiet bones of the room. Nothing is said, everything is heard. The hush of breath, the creak of linen, the tiny sigh that forgives before it understands. A presence bends toward warmth, a scent of sea and steel, while the song threads the moment together so it will not fall apart, knotting strangers into a fragile temporary whole. Morning arrives as pixels, not light. Frames reviewed in a windowless room where coffee tastes like suspicion. An arrow on a timeline hovers over a moment that refuses to behave, and a cursor becomes a finger pointing at fate. Silence sits in a fourth chair, louder than any verdict. The building's veins hum with data, while a decision loosens like a tooth. To watch, to warn, to weigh the cost of ignoring the obvious. The image isn't proof. It's hunger. The way need leaves fingerprints on glass. Somewhere a printer spits out a report that will outlive its readers. What was simple work becomes a story with witnesses, and the story, once awake, wants more. Home is a studio that smells of lemon cleaner and rain through a cracked window. A drawer sticks, then yields, coughing up a folded decade. Emails printed to save ink, a logo from a place that promised help for a price called. The paper's edges have furred like old wounds. On the screen, a password still works, a ghost key, opening a corridor of forms and signatures that look like someone else's handwriting. A date glints like broken glass. The same lullaby finds its way into the steam of the kettle, and the question that has lived nameless gets a face, a timestamp, a transaction. The city outside forgets, as cities do. Inside, forgetting has just become impossible. In a conference of glass, afternoon light sharpens every edge. Metrics bloom on a wall that pretends to be neutral. A minor anomaly curls through a report like smoke no filter can hide. Smiles get thinner. Words choose armor. And someone's pen stops clicking. The building's heartbeat quickens, as if it knows a different heart is knocking. Leverage doesn't need proof, only timing, and the clock on the wall keeps perfect time. A decision is folded once, twice, into something that can be slipped into a pocket and used later. The view is dazzling. The ground is moving. Morning inherits the hush of night, trading shadows for glassy daylight that makes every surface honest. And in that clarity, a small miracle repeats itself without ceremony. A storm-tossed child settles as soon as a certain melody touches the air, the cry dissolving like sugar in tea. The room is not built for wonder. It is built for schedules. Yet wonder insists, threading itself through routines, bottles warmed, sensors chiming, a soft cloth folded twice. Eyes measure, verify, record, because feelings are treacherous where power keeps score. A question expands until it presses against the window. Is calm a coincidence, or a signature written in breath? The song lowers the pulse of the machines and turns the polished room into something domestic, dangerous, impossible. Somewhere, a mind that catalogs patterns adds a new line. When the melody begins, the tremors end. The conclusion is premature. The pull undeniable. The silence after the lullaby louder than any alarm. Power enters quietly, like a tide that already owns the shore. Politeness becomes architecture, arranging chairs in distance, making space for a conversation that will not be called an interrogation. A voice trained to steady investors softens around its edges, asking for facts as if facts are not choices. The answer is small and practical. Work hours, checklist, mop routes, while underneath, a river claws at its banks. The song is never mentioned, nor the gravity that pulled it from the throat without permission. What is requested is compliance. What is offered is competence. What is withheld is the tremor that still lives in the wrist. The room smells of pine and secrecy. A promise appears like a trap disguised as mercy. Keep your routine, keep your paycheck, keep quiet. The heart bargains with the mouth and settles on survivable truths, while the window records the city pretending not to watch. The break room has the kind of light that tells the truth whether anyone wants it or not. White, humming, indifferent. A kettle ticks impatiently. A vending machine flickers through choices it cannot taste. Advice arrives, wrapped in an old worker's grammar, built from kitchens and bus stops and second jobs. An architecture of warnings that has kept people alive longer than any policy. Visibility is a currency that charges interest. The debt collectors wear lanyards. The reply is a protest that tries to be a whisper and fails, because the body has learned the pitch of fear. Every story on this floor has a bruise where it was pressed too hard. The elder hand on the younger shoulder is a bridge over a river that never rests. The tea goes cold, but resolve holds its heat. A small stove under a coat in bad weather. The clinic dresses itself in forgiveness. Soft chairs, hush money art, water that remembers mountains. Yet the desk speaks in error messages, and the archivist's smile belongs to a mask. A number becomes a labyrinth. A signature becomes a smudge no one can read. Patience is demanded with the grace of a fine. Time is extracted like a tooth. The past, when finally summoned, arrives with missing pages and a fresh receipt. A corridor smells of citrus and sterilized regret. The printer stutters as if embarrassed by what it makes. A door opens onto a man whose voice is velvet stretched over iron. Assurance pours like syrup and never sticks. Somewhere in the HVAC, a rattle keeps time with an old lullaby that refuses to stay buried. The exit is brighter than the entrance, but offers no map, only the outline of a question that now has teeth. Opportunity smiles with too many teeth. Compliments arrive tailored, precise, stitched from observation and intent, promising a ladder that leads out of the small rooms and into the weatherless air of decision-makers. The offer is wrapped in mentorship and sealed with confidentiality. A silk envelope around a blade. A calm, attentive face maps desire like a surveyor and plants a flag exactly where loyalty might grow. The answer, polite and cautious, wears its own disguise, because safety requires the performance of gratitude. Somewhere, a camera blinks and writes the scene in numbers that cannot capture motive. The room smells faintly of jasmine and ozone. A future is placed on the table like a card turned face up, but the deck is not complete, and the dealer does not blink. Outside, the city flickers. Inside, an equation balances on a single undisclosed variable. Wealth arrives dressed as light, poured from chandeliers like a blessing that forgot its purpose, and the room answers with laughter that sounds insured. Crystal remembers every touch. Velvet keeps the secrets of elbows and deals. The floor is a lake of lacquer where reflections walk themselves, and a quiet pair of hands steers a cart through tides of perfume and politics. Music braids around conversations about markets and miracles. On a balcony, the city holds its breath for the next story of growth. The choreography is perfect until it isn't. A rumor of a child upstairs, a song that once stitched a night back together, a gravity that ignores guest lists. Eyes slide over uniforms the way rain slides over glass, but not all eyes are careless. Somewhere behind a smile, a ledger updates. Somewhere behind a curtain, a camera learns to want. Even the flowers look expensive enough to lie. The evening fractures on something small, a lift of strings from above, the thread of a melody crossing floors like a memory that doesn't ask permission. The sound changes the air, draws a map only two hearts can read. A child in a world of glass leans toward it, arms opening as if the song were sunlight. The room below keeps dancing, counting backward toward midnight budgets, while upstairs a camera tilts to curiosity and then to hunger. The moment is simple. Reach, touch, breathe. And also an alarm too quiet for the security feed to name. The song finds its ending, and the silence that follows is bright as a flash, etching outlines into everyone who witnessed it. When applause erupts downstairs, it feels misplaced, as if the clapping belongs to a different story that no longer owns the night. The offer arrives folded like a handkerchief, silken and practical. A transfer to someplace quieter, a sum that erases certain months, a non-disclosure dressed as kindness. The room chosen for this is small and perfect, the kind of space where truth feels impolite. Polished wood reflects nothing useful. Water in a crystal tumbler pretends to be neutral. Words are measured in the currency of reason. No fault, no harm, no headlines. Yet each syllable carries the cold of a locked door. The reply climbs a narrow staircase inside the chest and chooses air over safety. The simple refusal that costs more than it sounds. A pause blooms. Numbers rearrange behind someone's eyes, contingency plans tested against an unexpected variable. Dignity. Outside the glass, the city edits itself into compliance. Inside, the unscripted holds. Truth rarely arrives with fanfare. It slips in on paper stock and hospital ink, modest as a wristband that once circled a miracle. A quiet ally chooses a corner where cameras blink less and hands over a fragment, the size of a breath. Numbers align like constellations that were always there. Only clouds had the courtesy to hide them until now. The body knows before the mind finishes reading. Knows in the loosening of something that has been clenched since an old decision wore a younger face. Gratitude rises with caution, riding its back. Gifts here have teeth. Yet, this gift feels like a bridge built of simple plastic, cheap, and indestructible. The pocket becomes a vault. Steps back into the corridor sound different, as if the floor has learned a new name for gravity. Accusation enters like winter, not loud but total, making every object in the room appear brittle and complicit. A drawer sticks, a tag is missing, an inventory line has learned to lie. The questions are simple, which is another way of saying dangerous. Somewhere the truth sits spotless and small, but suspicion eats context for fuel. The heartbeat that has survived months of night work decides not to run, stands where it stands, lets breath slow and hands open. Calm is not innocence, but it can look like it. And sometimes the difference is enough to change the weather. A test unfolds in glances and silences, a net tossed to see what swims. When the moment passes without the flinch that was expected, a new calculation begins, colder, closer, clockwork finding a different gear. The plan is small enough to hide in a palm. Plastic, sleep warmed, slick with trust. Timing is everything. The building's pulse dips after shift change. Cameras blink on prescribed intervals, and the nursery breathes in a hush that makes courage sound like treason. A song hums only in memory, as the object is palmed, turned, sealed like a prayer. Guilt and relief braid together. one tightening when the other loosens, and the room seems to lean, waiting for the universe to register the theft and send consequence sprinting. No alarms, only the subdued whir of air and the soft rustle of fabric admitting a secret into its folds. In the corridor, each footfall counts a different future. The elevator doors kiss, closed with a whisper that feels like complicity. In the pocket, evidence thumps a heartbeat rhythm, and the night for once belongs to a truth that might be measured. Numbers arrive without sentiment, black marks on white that move a horizon line inside the chest. Percentages climb a ladder toward certainty until even doubt grows quiet, until breath forgets how to pace itself. The screen's light is moon cold, the room held together by four walls, and a chair that suddenly feels too small for a body, learning the shape of forever. A laugh starts and folds into a sob, indistinguishable in their hunger. Paper prints and curls, as if it wants to keep some heat for itself. The mind inventories 1,000 consequences, bright and terrible. Courts, contracts, headlines. Lullabies sung without permission becoming lullabies sung by right. Somewhere a kettle clicks off, forgot. Somewhere a past self looks up from a form and does not know the future walking toward her. The page trembles until fingers decide to still it. The verdict is gentle as thunder. News travels faster when it is useful. It rides the private lanes where power keeps its cars, arriving neatly folded in the hands of someone who measures outcomes by quarterly weather. The room chosen for the revelation is bright enough to make denial squint. Words are polished to a neutral shine. Risk, stability, optics. Each a tile laid over the fault line. Shock is a small storm that passes in silence, leaving reordered furniture in its wake. Then comes the colder front. Strategy. Gratitude has no seat here. Only leverage does. The truth that should have arrived soft finds itself escorted by numbers and non-negotiables, and the question of who knew first becomes a blade's edge. Outside, a gull rides the updraft and never touches the glass. Inside, loyalty is graphed, and debt is tallied, and a man who builds systems learns he is living inside one. Confession is negotiated, not given. It comes swaddled in caveats delayed by calendars, priced by the ounce. A room that sells mercy in installments hosts the conversation, and the voice across the desk is trained to coat iron with velvet. Paper appears as if by magic, every signature, a breadcrumb back to a ledger no one wants public. The word for what happened disguises itself. Anomaly, mismatch, clerical variance, each syllable stepping carefully around the crater. Funding timelines become weather, pressure becomes geology. Intention is replaced by inevitability. Still, under the smooth language, a crack widens and the daylight through. It is blinding. A recorder rests like a sleeping animal between elbows. When it blinks awake, sentences learn to carry their own weight. The narrative that once felt unthinkable sits on the table. And for a moment, the room smells faintly of disinfectant and truth. Power tests the fire alarm but hopes for a controlled burn. An agenda blooms in careful bullet points, purity of governance invoked like scripture. Contingency plans nested like dolls. The table gleams with the confidence of polished wood. The faces around it carry identical poise, different appetites. A narrative is offered. Instability above, stewardship required below. The market hates uncertainty, and rescue always looks best in mirrors. What the room underestimates is the volatility of truth once it catches air. Votes are counted in glances long before hands are raised. Someone smiles as if at a private joke and moves a piece no one else marked. The motion passes to consideration, which is just a slower word for knife. Outside the glass, fog drags itself inland. Inside, the weather turns decisional and cold. Morning detonates without warning. Not sunlight, but syllables. A headline that snaps open like a trap. and scatters dignity across 1,000 screens. The building's elevators carry whispers between floors faster than electricity. Each ping is a verdict, disguised as logistics. Phones bloom with links, comments breed under glass like mold, and the story arrives already edited to sell. A claim, a cleaner, an heir. Work badges hesitate at turnstiles as if deciding who their loyalties belong to. The air tastes metallic, printer ink sharp, and somewhere a publicist fires up a war room while a lullaby, once a secret, becomes a weaponized echo. What becomes unbearable isn't accusation, but the choreography of distance. Colleagues stepping around a life as if it were wet paint. Executives folding concern into smiles while measuring exposure. Truth feels small next to the spectacle, yet it holds its pulse. Stubborn and warm. Silence arrives in the language of HR. Paragraphs that pretend to be cushions and are really floors. A chair is pulled out with courtesy, and a life is pushed back with care. The phrases are artfully dull. Transition, investigation, administrative necessity. Yet each one lands with the authority of a locked door. A cardboard box appears like a magician's prop, summoning the theater of endings. A mug, a sweater, the key to a bathroom no one else used. The air is overconditioned, the smiles under-rehearsed, and the clock insists on moving forward, as if time weren't complicit. Outside the window, the city acts busy to avoid eye contact. Inside, gratitude is expected to perform a small dance before it exits. The body obeys protocol because protocol is the only bridge over the drop. Even so, the steps feel like a refusal to vanish. Legal thunder doesn't roar. It arrives in the hush of courier envelopes and the weight of names arranged in bold. The language is winter dry, a map of boundaries that makes breathing feel like trespass. Somewhere, a lullaby is reclassified as evidence. Intimacy becomes a docket number, and affection is instructed to keep to its lane. The instinct to fight stirs, then steadies, knowing that rage is a poor translator in rooms where precedent is worshipped. Across town, a man who believes in systems signs his name to a shield he prays will not wound what it guards. Paper, stamped and threaded, becomes a river redirected by dams no one voted for. Outside, clouds pull a gray hood over the city. Inside, resolve finds a warmer coat. If there is a path through this, it is narrow and exacting, lit by the smallest, most stubborn truths. Truth expands inside a notebook the size of a palm, each page a small lantern against corridors designed to confuse. Dates line up like soldiers, payments march from a shell with a pretty name to accounts that never blink, and initials thread through intake forms like a secret signature. The pattern clicks into place with the satisfaction of a key turning. Wonder and anger share a single breath. The room where this is read feels too small for what it now contains. Even the kettle goes quiet as if listening. The past stops being fog and becomes a street with clear addresses. Fear doesn't vanish. It learns to hold a camera. Strategy grows out of the margin notes. Who to tell, what to copy, how to keep the paper from disappearing. When the book closes, it feels heavier, as if the spine had learned a new gravity. Loyalty is a retainer until it isn't. The message comes as absence, calls unanswered, access cooled. And the man who reads systems for a living reads the new rate, expendable. Discretion sheds its uniform and curiosity puts on work boots. A meeting is arranged in a place where metal remembers heat, the kind of lock that swallows secrets without chewing. The drive exchanged is small enough to lose and heavy enough to tilt outcomes. Words are few. Obligations are recalculated with the math of survival. Somewhere, a coup rehearses its next act. Somewhere else, a door that thought it was an exit discovers it's a hinge. The night carries the taste of ozone and rubber, while engines fade to distant waves. Hope is not declared. It is pocketed, along with the proof that stories can be unspooled and rewoven if you hold the thread. Night becomes an operating table where the wound is money and the scalpel is time, and the three of them learn to breathe in the tempo of evidence. Screens blossom with mirrored folders, Bank trails harden from rumor into roads with mile markers. A calendar grid turns into an indictment when dates align like teeth. Every click feels like tapping a vein and watching truth fill the line. The room smells of printer heat and rain carried in on coats, of rubber from a drive case passed hand to hand like contraband hope. They rehearse what must be said, and what must only be shown, because some truths bruise when spoken. Outside, tires hiss on wet streets. Inside, courage calibrates itself to the size of the task. By the time dawn stains the blinds, the story isn't a story anymore. It's a schematic, a machine, and it hums without permission. Daylight bleaches the boardroom until faces look like outcomes. The table is set with words that erase fingerprints. Fiduciary, continuity, volatility. Each one a curtain over intent. A case is built from graphs that prefer fear and models that never met a cradle. The person at the head of it studies the numbers as if they were weather, finds the hurricane centered not on profit but on a child, and the two bodies that gravity keeps returning to him. The trap is polite. Protect the enterprise, quarantine the variables, brand compassion as risk. He answers with language learned from building engines, inputs, latency, failure modes. But what rises to his mouth is a melody he can't explain to a spreadsheet. Silence drains the room of oxygen. Votes line up in posture before they become hands. Somewhere a phone buzzes with the beginning of a different ending. Hospitals teach people to speak softly when doing harm. The office that sells beginnings tries to do endings the same way, but a recorder on the table learns the taste of truth and will not spit it out. Questions arrive like steady rain, each drop a fact that leaks through wallpaper words until the paint bubbles and peels. Process surrenders to pressure. Variance makes room for directive. Error steps aside for the old names. Purchase, timeline, leverage. A signature is shown a mirror and admits what it sees. Shame doesn't fix blood, but it moves it. When the door finally opens, the hallway air feels rural, full of weather and consequence. There will be cleanup and counter-narratives, and yet a simple certainty has hatched. The story can walk on its own legs now, even if someone tries to turn off the lights. Some revelations arrive as documents, others arrive as sound. He watches the recording alone. The room shrunk to a screen and a breath he keeps forgetting to release. The voice that once sold certainty now names its opposite, and with each admission a wall inside his chest steps back. A familiar melody brushes the edges of memory. Untrained, human, the kind that keeps small lungs from flooding, and it unlocks a door numbers never found. The machine of his life, built to run on control, stutters and recalibrates around tenderness like it's a new operating system. Outside the glass, a sky the color of doubt. Inside, a sleeping child who has never cared about governance, only arms. The last sentence lands like weather changing. A choice gathers itself without asking permission and waits by the door like a coat. Dusk folds the city into the pocket where real choices hide. They meet without an audience, wind lifting edges of words until only the heavy ones stay. Apologies behave like weather fronts, passing and leaving clearer air. Not absolution, not yet, but a climate change. The plan they build is plain as bread and twice as hard to bake. Show everything. Own what cannot be repaired. Refuse the mathematics that treats a child as a metric. Risk blooms large and honest. Safety becomes something handmade. They speak quietly because the future is sleeping somewhere close, and louder sounds feel like theft. When they part, nothing is solved, and everything is different. Distance is a bridge now, not a moat. And tomorrow has instructions that do not require permission from any board. Truth walks on stage wearing a public address badge and trembling microphones, and the room that once sold silence learns a new acoustics. Rows of faces tilt like sunflowers toward heat. Cameras blink their insect eyes. hungry for a verdict with ad breaks. Words that hid behind euphemisms step forward in their real clothes, and the air sharpens until breath feels citric. A hand finds another under the table, not to hide but to steady the spine, while a chorus of paperwork becomes a hymn. The old narrative fights like a cornered thing: process, policy, precedent. But the new one is simpler: consent, care, consequence. Each sentence drops like a stone in a glass lake, ripples colliding until nothing reflects the way it used to. When the final admission lands, the room exhales as if a long winter has ended. And outside the doors, the city seems briefly capable of repair. Power returns to its favorite mirror and does not like what it sees. The table sets itself like a chessboard, pieces arranged by appetite, but the opening move ignores the book. A voice that once wrote algorithms speaks plainly, laying down clauses like jackets over puddles so a child won't get wet. Control is surrendered, not as defeat, but as scaffolding kicked away once the house stands. The room blinks, disoriented by generosity in a dialect it does not trade in. Contracts shuffle like birds startled into flight. Signatures find new angles, softer and braver. The word stability learns a different meaning. Less fortress, more bridge, and resistance loses its echo. Somewhere a market graph trembles and then steadies. Somewhere else, a lullaby touches the window and fogs the glass. When the vote is called, hands rise as if lighter than they were a moment ago. Defeat chooses elegance when it can afford it. The speech is short, the smile crisp, the gaze already measuring the next field. A threat is folded into courtesy like a blade in linen, and the elevator summons itself as if eager to carry ambition elsewhere. What remains after the click of doors is not triumph but usable space, the vacuum where better air can move. The building seems to shed a temperature. Screens blink less like interrogations and more like windows. There are costs. There always are. But the ledger, for once, records something other than appetite. In the silence that follows, the future rustles its paper wings. People look at one another and see faces rather than roles, and the feeling is so unfamiliar it makes the heart misstep, then find a steadier rhythm. At last there is a room without microphones, just breath and paper, and the kind of light that forgives. A toy rustles like a soft wing, and a small palm finds two larger ones, stitching 3 pulses into a single metronome. No speeches here, only the business of ordinary tenderness, folding a blanket corner, catching a laugh before it turns into a cry, setting a cup within reach. Wealth waits politely by the door, unsure how to behave when there is nothing to purchase. The world outside keeps its calendars. Inside, time learns to sit on the floor. A simple craft becomes treaty and talisman, crease upon crease until something fragile can hold a shape. When the little hand presses it flat, the paper remembers every fold and calls it home. Endings prefer modest runes. The grand gesture is elsewhere. Here it is policies rewritten in human handwriting. Money redirected like a river, finally allowed its old bed. Calendars marked with days that belong to laughter and fevers and firsts. The story closes not with a door but with a threshold, a promise to keep crossing back to the ordinary and make it sacred. There will be hard weather again. The world is not cured by a single hearing, but the axis has moved and the house stands without the scaffolding of secrecy. In the quiet, a melody that once betrayed time becomes time's keeper, guiding sleep and mornings and the courage to stay. When the city lights up its glass, it reflects something softer. 3 silhouettes, one small and growing, choosing the sky they can carry together.